Tonight, the message behind Mark Carney's first trip abroad. The warm welcome and the elephant in the room.
Determined like you to maintain the most positive possible relations with the United States.
Deepening ties with Europe, but how will it play with Donald Trump? The Conservatives breathe new life into a carbon tax campaign.
No taxes on Canadian industries.
Carney's response to Poilievre's new pledge to big polluters. Plus, police identify a second set of remains found in a Manitoba landfill.
We've been able to bring these women home.
Also, why these Quebec communities are under a state of alert. And a sea of green.
I think we all have a little bit of Irish in us.
Revelers raise a glass to all things Irish.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Heather Butts.
Good evening. Prime Minister Mark Carney is starting his first full week on the job in Europe, reaching across the Atlantic to deepen ties with old allies as Canada faces economic and political threats from the United States. Carney met with French President Emmanuel Macron before heading to London to meet with King Charles and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. But the shadow of Donald Trump's trade war loomed large in every meeting. CTV's Mike LeCouture on the economic push and how it was received by foreign leaders.
At a time when Canada's faith in its closest allies has been tested, Prime Minister Mark Carney made a pilgrimage to Paris, hoping to renew those ties. French President Emmanuel Macron stood shoulder to shoulder with Carney, vowing to work together as the U.S. becomes more protectionist.
Nous sommes plus forts ensemble.
We are stronger together, says Macron, better able to ensure the respect of our interests and sovereignty. Similar support came from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
To sovereign allies.
Still, Carney says Canada doesn't need anyone to come to our aid.
I don't think one needs to respond to every comment about another country. Look, we can stand up for ourselves. Canada's strong. We can stand up for ourselves.
Besides words of support, Starmer and Macron offered little else, and opposition leader Pierre Poilievre believes that makes this trip a bust.
I would have liked to seen Mr. Carney come home with a natural gas supply agreement signed with the French, the way the Qataris have done.
The U.S. had threatened global tariffs on a number of allies starting April 2nd. And while Carney had campaigned on a dollar-for-dollar response in counter-tariffs, he now says Canada can't punch back as hard.
There's a limit to matching these tariffs dollar for dollar, given the fact that our economy is a tenth the size of the United States.
The threat of Donald Trump hangs over this trip, and Carney's team says having a call with the U.S. president remains a priority for the Prime Minister when he returns home. But before he heads back to Ottawa, Carney will stop in Nunavut to reaffirm Canada's sovereignty over the Arctic. Heather?
CTV's Mike LeCouture in London tonight. Back in this country, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre pledged to take the carbon tax fight to the next level, should he be elected Prime Minister one day. CTV's Rachel Aiello on what he wants to scrap next.
A steel plant in eastern Ontario, today Pierre Poilievre took his pledge to scrap the consumer carbon tax a step further.
A common sense, Canada First Conservative government will repeal the entire carbon tax, including the federal backstop that requires provinces impose industrial taxes.
The Conservative leader said he would remove the price on big emitters to help industries being hit by U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs.
I once again say to Donald Trump, why would you go after these people?
This policy pledge comes after Mark Carney, in his first act as Prime Minister, signed a directive on Friday ending the consumer carbon tax through regulations, while upholding the industrial portion.
It's my honor, on behalf of my colleagues, to sign this order.
That move sparked heated debate over the weekend, with some questioning the process, noting the carbon pricing law has not been repealed in Parliament. Today, Carney was asked if he still thinks keeping a tax on industrial polluters is viable amid Trump's threats.
We have to be able to connect the dots, something that the opposition is totally incapable of doing. Guess what one of the requirements is to diversify trade to the European Union? Guess what one of the requirements will be to diversify trade to emerging Asia? Is to have a form of price on carbon.
Only 4 provinces and territories apply the federal industrial carbon price. The rest operate their own carbon pricing systems. While Poilievre says he'd expand clean technology tax credits instead, analysis from the Canadian Climate Institute suggests Canada's industrial carbon pricing, if maintained, would do more than any other policy to cut emissions over the next 5 years.
If you're going to eliminate the industrial carbon price, then we are going to have a major hole in our climate policy.
Asked what climate targets a Conservative government would commit to, Poilievre was non-committal, saying he would treat reducing emissions as a global problem. Heather?
Rachel, thank you. The human remains of an Indigenous woman murdered by a serial killer have been identified. She is the second victim to be found in a Manitoba landfill after a controversial push to search the area. CTV's Alex Carpa on how the community is reacting tonight.
A mix of sadness and relief as RCMP confirmed the second set of human remains found in a Winnipeg area landfill belonged to Mercedes Myron.
We've been able to bring these women home.
Myron's remains were one of 2 sets found in the search that began in December. The other remains were those of Morgan Harris, which were publicly identified on March 7th.
The work is possible, and now we know that the work will continue, and we have many families that are still looking for their loved ones.
Both Myron and Harris were among 4 Indigenous women murdered by convicted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky back in 2022. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew said his government was able to do right by the families.
Many of us knew the odds of success. I certainly was always trying to keep a realistic perspective, but it turns out bringing them home was within our grasp and something we were able to do for these families.
The decision to search the landfill was controversial. Winnipeg police in 2022 refused to search, saying it was not feasible. The previous progressive Conservative government in Manitoba said it wouldn't support a search due to safety concerns. Sandra De Laurent says she believes the discovery of both Harris and Myron would have never happened if Kinew was not premier.
I think what it shows, what we can do collectively in creating change, and hopefully that all Manitobans will remember this day.
At this time, both the Harris and Myron families have asked for privacy as they deal with this news. Alex Carpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
A former University of Waterloo student who went on a stabbing rampage in a gender studies class will not be convicted for terrorism, but the attack did meet the definition of a hate crime. 25-year-old Giovanni Villalba Alman has been sentenced 7.5 more years behind bars. The judge called his actions a particularly grave hate crime, but found they didn't meet the ideological bar for terrorism. Last year, the former student pleaded guilty to multiple charges in connection to the stabbings of 2 students and a professor. He also left a ripped-up pride flag at the scene. Measles cases in Canada are on the rise, with officials in Alberta warning people about possible exposure to the highly contagious virus in Edmonton. This all comes as vaccination rates are declining. CTV's Heather Wright on the bold steps some schools in Ontario are taking against unvaccinated students.
Thousands of Ontario students have been suspended from school, with thousands more facing similar discipline due to missing or out-of-date vaccination records. And while these reviews into vaccine records began months ago, they come as measles cases rise in several parts of the country.
The real issue here is that there's pockets of under-vaccinated individuals and communities with under-vaccinated pockets in the country. And when measles enters those pockets, it exploits them. It's one of the most transmissible infections out there.
The suspensions were handed down after letters were sent home by multiple school boards asking parents and guardians to update their child's records or provide a valid exemption. Vaccination rates in Ontario have been dropping over the years, with Ontario Public Health reporting that last school year, just 70% of 7-year-olds were fully vaccinated against the measles, well below the 95% needed for herd immunity. And while many people recovered from the virus, it can cause serious complications.
If the virus can spread into your lungs, you can get a very severe pneumonia. If it spreads into your central nervous system, into your brain, it can actually cause brain damage, and that's where the fatal cases really come from.
Last month in Texas, an unvaccinated child died after contracting measles as an outbreak there continues to spread. Officials point to a number of factors behind declining vaccine rates. Many people missed vaccines during the pandemic. There has been a spread of vaccine misinformation and a shortage of family doctors here in Canada.
They go and see a family doc, and family doctor would ask you about your vaccine status. We don't have that connection anymore.
Officials are encouraging people to check their vaccine records or reach out to public health if records aren't available.
And a rise in measles cases is not unique to North America. According to the World Health Organization, cases in Europe doubled last year to the highest levels in 25 years. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
Spring flooding is wreaking havoc across parts of Quebec as some schools were closed and hundreds were forced from their homes. CTV's Jean-Pierre Bushman shows us how people are coping in Drummondville.
Massive chunks of ice jammed up several rivers in Quebec, forcing waterways to breach their banks. Tonight, Drummondville is on high alert. Eric Aprou watched the water rise in a flash. The pressure pushed in a door and filled her garage and basement with dirty sludge. She says she feared she would be trapped. Firefighters had to rescue her by boat from her home. 300 homes and businesses were evacuated in Drummondville. This while an hour away in Nicolette, a Coast Guard hovercraft broke up the ice cover on the river. The aim was to force floodwaters to retreat. The water filtration plant was submerged and shut down. We declared a state of emergency, says Mayor Geneviève Dubois, who distributed drinking water to long-term care homes and daycares. In Beauceville, an hour out of Quebec City, several roads and schools were closed, homes evacuated.
We've taken care of about 25 people here that needed the direct support from us last night, and there's probably 75 people that were in the city that needed to go see friends and evacuate somewhere else.
Spring is still days away, but the annual thaw got underway fast. Temperatures shot up to 19 degrees in Beauceville Sunday, and several other regions of Quebec beat record high temperatures.
Mix that with all the water we got and the snow that accumulated all winter long, and this is the result. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Drummondville, Quebec.
At least 40 people are dead after a fatal series of storms barreled across the south, Midwest, and central parts of the United States.
Shock, numb, don't know what to think, don't know what to say anymore.
Tornadoes, hail, flooding, rains, dust storms, and wildfires devastated parts of the country. Homes, businesses, vehicles, and whole neighborhoods were wiped out. Tens of thousands of people have begun to clean up the destruction in some of the hardest hit areas. It could take years. Israel's military says it is conducting extensive airstrikes against Hamas targets in Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says at least 44 people have been killed and dozens more wounded. It is the largest attack since the ceasefire began on January 19th.
It's a bad situation in Russia, and it's a bad situation in Ukraine. We're going to see if we can work a peace agreement.
U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin tomorrow as he pushes for a ceasefire in the war in Ukraine. The Trump administration is defending its latest controversial move, deporting hundreds of alleged gang members from U.S. soil. And not even a court order could stop the White House from moving ahead. Here's CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbin on how the president is testing the boundaries of his power.
The video shared by El Salvador's president looks like a Hollywood movie. More than 200 alleged Venezuelan gang members paraded around, shackled, their heads shaved. The U.S. paid El Salvador $6 million to imprison them. More than half were deported under a rare wartime law, the Alien Enemies Act, that Trump invoked for the first time since the Second World War, giving him sweeping powers.
They invaded our country. So this isn't, in that sense, this is war. I can tell you this, these were bad people. That was a bad group of, as I say, hombres.
A federal judge blocked the move, ordering the planes to turn around. That didn't happen. The administration denies it defied the judge's order, saying the planes were already out of U.S. airspace.
The president used his authority under the Alien Enemies Act to deport foreign terrorists. Tren de Aragua is now a designated foreign terrorist organization.
It's all part of an escalating crackdown on illegal immigration as promised by Donald Trump and his new border czar.
We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
Civil liberties groups accuse the White House of abusing wartime powers when the U.S. isn't even at war.
I do think we are slipping closer and closer to a constitutional crisis. Criticizing federal judges, saying they don't have authority. I think we're on dangerous ground here in the United States.
Late today, the judge scolded Trump's Justice Department, demanding to know why his orders were ignored as Trump continues to push the boundaries of his presidential powers. Heather?
Joy, thanks. Coming up, Hudson's Bay on the brink.
It's been around forever. It's a sad day.
Find out when Canada's oldest company could be headed for liquidation.
Tomorrow.
Just shut the fuck up and listen.
From spiritual matchmakers to accused cult leaders.
You do not school me.
Canadian Shalia Devine and her husband Jeff Devine accused of brainwashing followers.
Jeff Devine is a psychopath.
You. My business depends on all of you.
W5 investigates tomorrow on CTV National News and ctvnews.ca.
Hudson's Bay was in court today and could begin liquidating stores tomorrow as time runs out to find a financial lifeline. CTV's John Venevali-Rao on the last-minute search for a deal to save the business.
Inside the Bay, it still looks to be business as usual, with no signs yet of the massive liquidation to come.
I don't think it's good at all. It's a Canadian institution.
An institution whose lawyers were in a courtroom today seeking a judge's approval to start selling everything off, something opposed by counsel for the employees with more than 9,000 jobs on the line.
In a full liquidation, if all the stores are shut down and nothing gets acquired by another purchaser, then generally there's massive job loss, pension plan windups. It's the shutdown of a company.
The Hudson's Bay, which owes nearly $1 billion to creditors, has so far been unsuccessful at securing a financial lifeline.
They've got landlords chasing them, suppliers chasing them. I think this is the end.
A liquidation would involve 80 Bay stores, as well as several Saks Fifth and Off Fifth locations. It's all expected to take 10 to 12 weeks. Notably, Hudson's Bay will stop accepting gift cards as of April 6th, and its loyalty points program has been suspended. This woman says she tried to use her gift card today, and it didn't work.
So I'm on the phone right now trying to get through to see if they can reactivate it. The lady there told me to reactivate it.
Outside a store, we met Carl Carter. He works for Armani, which leased space inside of a Bay store in Toronto. Amid the troubles, it decided to close up last week, and Carter was laid off.
I've already shed a couple of tears all around. It's sad. It's sad. I mean, not just for myself, but for potentially thousands of people's, jobs and employment.
As for the court proceeding, it was adjourned without a ruling. But a go-ahead for a liquidation could come as early as Tuesday. John Venevali-Rao, CTV News, Toronto.
Still ahead, fishing for a different lifeline. How fishers from Atlantic Canada are casting a wide net into a two-pronged tariff war. Facing an escalating trade war with the U.S. and incoming Chinese tariffs on Canadian seafood products, the industry is in search of calmer waters to weather the storm. CTV's Sarah Plowman on what harvesters need to save their livelihood.
A big storm is on its way. Tariffs on seafood could come from the south and east. Coastal communities built on fishing are exposed.
We're going to be sacrificed here in Atlantic Canada for the car industry in Ontario.
That's what many here fear, forced to face two trade wars, one with China, the other the U.S. China's 25% tariff on Canadian seafood starts Thursday. Retaliation for Canada's 100% tariff on China's electric vehicles and metals.
It's going to be worse than the American tariff to me in a way, because I think the American lobster fishermen will put a real kick up to get this tariff off.
The United States and China are by far the largest seafood exports for Canada. In Boston, at a seafood expo this week, suppliers, producers, politicians from here tried to make inroads with other countries.
Singapore was one of the ones we talked with, a few different ones from there, Southeast Asia, Italy into Europe.
Nova Scotia's fisheries minister says companies made a deal with a new contact in the Philippines. Another deal could go to Spain.
I was expecting doom and gloom when I came down here, and it is not that. There's a lot more optimism for the demand for our product.
But any shift in these trade winds won't happen quickly, and so fishermen brace for what's rolling in. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Blacks Harbor, New Brunswick.
Still ahead, going green. How Canadians are soaking up St. Patrick's Day celebrations. This is St. Patrick's Day, when everyone can go green and celebrate Irish culture. 500,000 spectators line the streets of Dublin to take in Ireland's national parade. And the Princess of Wales enjoyed a Guinness with the Irish Guards in London. As the saying goes, everyone's Irish on St. Paddy's Day. Here's CTV's Jessica Smith with how people in Toronto marked the occasion.
Everywhere you look today, it's a sea of green for St. Patrick's Day.
It's just great to have, it's kind of St. Patrick's Day. It's from a small country, but the Irish have a massive impact all over the world.
Opening their doors at 9 a.m., the Wolftone Irish Pub in Toronto's Beaches neighborhood was ready for the revelers first thing this morning.
I'm happy that everyone calls themselves Irish because I think it's a great country, great people, and we've embraced it over here.
Whether you're celebrating your own Irish heritage or just the spirit of the day, the holiday holds a special significance for all who celebrate.
I think we all have a little bit of Irish in us.
I'm Irish as well, and it's kind of a great day to take. I mean, I literally took off work today so I could celebrate, obviously.
From the young to the young at heart, all are welcome to lift a glass or take a little break from the party. There's no shortage of ways to celebrate.
Mostly for her birthday, but also just to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, warm weather, any excuse to get together and have fun is perfect.
Yeah, that's a good thing about having a birthday on St. Patrick's Day. Who is St. Patrick anyway?
St. Patrick's Day, and I'm on maternity leave, so let's go out for a day lunch.
And the party is just getting started.
The celebrations here at the Wolftone Irish Pub go right into the early morning hours, so there's still plenty of time to celebrate. Jessica Smith, CTV News, Toronto.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. That is our newscast for this Monday evening. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Todd Vander Hayden is here with you tomorrow. Good night.